Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professionals, helping to provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges throughout the life cycle of their business. I do that through identifying the problem and helping them come up with implementable, practical solutions. I am a cybersecurity subject matter expert and business attorney.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media agencies, and professional and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there is greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com. And today, we have a very special guest. Who do we have?
A very special guest.
You're supposed to introduce who we have.
Oh, I'm doing introductions
Yes,
today.
I changed it up on you.
Oh, I see. You threw me a curveball.
I did want to see if you were paying attention.
I usually get scrutinized for that at home.
Yeah.
All right. We have an old, long-time friend here today. It's Mike Grindell, the Executive Vice President, Operations Security Officer, CPIM. Or
CIPM.
See, you made me. See, I'm learning bad habits from you. At 22 Squared. He's a senior executive with experience in leading change and driving business results, IT, real estate, security, and privacy. His purpose is to work with and impact individuals and communities deeply so that they can find meaning and purpose and be inspired to be their best selves for years to come.
Mike, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Glad to be part of it and looking forward to it.
I think what's so interesting is your career journey. And I'd love if you can share how you got started and really how privacy and security joined you in your career and how it came into your umbrella.
You know, it's interesting. I get asked often, how did a senior HR guy from the Coca-Cola company become a security and privacy expert at an advertising agency? I started out my career in retail. I worked for Federated Department Stores. I had a little left-hand turn and worked at Citicorp Mortgage for a couple of years in sales, not my thing. Then I worked at the Coca-Cola company for 16 years. I got my MBA at Gosweda Business School while I was there. And I got to my late 40s and I just knew in my gut that you could work for a company that was building a good business and was also doing good things for their employees and building a good culture. And I was very lucky to find 22 Squared, a mid-sized advertising agency based here in Atlanta and Tampa, and got going with 22 Squared. And I learned that my thing, if someone says, what is your thing, Mike? My thing is strategic implementation. So I take difficult, challenging business challenges, organize the right people, organize the work, and we'll deliver on time, probably under budget. And most importantly, people will feel great about what we're doing. So as I got into advertising, in the early days, say 5 to 10 years ago, we started seeing client, and I'm going to say this in air quotes, which I know you can't see on a podcast, but client security addendums. And in the early days, they may have been a page or two, but then they started being, 100 items or many, many pages or many, many rounds. And there wasn't anyone at the agency owning those, so to speak. So I started getting involved in those more and more. And then I started learning that there had to be a framework we could operate against. to kind of be prepared for these security addendums. So I'm going to say 6 or 7 years ago, we did our first SOC 2 Type 2 attestation. Learned all about the trust services principles and the AICPA and all of that world. And when we got to where we had a good routine and cadence around that. But then we realized that that clearly wasn't enough. So now we've written an incident response plan 2.5 years ago. I got my CIPM designation 2.5 years ago. We're in the throes of data mapping for CCPA. We're trying to decide whether we should do pen testing this year or put in a SIM platform. So that's kind of all evolved. It's the industry, clients, and my role at the agency have all come together.
So Mike, it sounds like from what you're saying is during the course of your work, you identified an area that you thought was important that the business wasn't fully appreciating. That sounds strangely familiar to someone else's career arc.
I don't know that it was that the business wasn't fully appreciating it. It was a growing recognition that we had to mature our security posture in order to be able to compete for the kind of clients we want to work with. Fast forward to today, there's now a parent company over 22 Squared called Guided by Good, and there's 2 divisions, 22 Squared and Trade School. Trade School is a content production agency and has clients like the Home Depot and FedEx and Shark Ninja. 22 Squared, 98-year-old creative digital analytics advertising agency, Publix, Baskin Robbins, Southeast Toyota, Truist Bank, TIA Bank. Well, you can imagine the security and privacy requirements of those entities. In fact, last year, one of our banking clients during COVID, during the pandemic, we completed a 2-day security audit remotely, which was a lot of work, but is table stakes now. And so you're exactly right. What we saw was we needed to have this capability, and I had the energy and interest to learn how to be capable in the area.
It's funny that you say that, Michael, because I think maybe you're not giving you and your organization enough credit, because I've handled multiple ransomware events for healthcare organizations, and one said, well, wait, we're SOC 2 compliant. And then I'm thinking, if you're SOC 2 compliant, why didn't you have multi-factor authentication for your remote workforce where the whole incident originated? But yet in that regulated industry, ransomware and the costs from breaches is the highest. So if you're telling us that you were able to persuade your organization to do this without having to have some type of ransomware event, then it seems to me that your organization is on the forefront of doing the right thing before they learn the hard consequences.
Yeah, I agree with that. What our CEO sits on an advertising association roundtable, and what he always brings back from those sessions is that we are further along than many, and certainly as an independent advertising agency. Now, I'm also aware that just when you think you're making progress, you've got to mature your security posture, double. And, this year I'm working with some outside advice to determine what is the next security framework we need to, I always struggle with the right word, adhere to, align to. And we're doing an evaluation whether that should be ISO 27002, I'm just going to use a bunch of lingo here, or NIST. And I think where we're going to land is that ISO 27002 plus SOC 2 Type 2 will be right for us. Mm-hmm. And, we're going to do a matrix against our clients' requirements and a matrix against, our business, and do a gap analysis and then figure out what we need to do to close that. But that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. And I want to echo what Justin shared. I was going to say something fairly similar and actually ask, because there are so many advertising agencies that don't recognize and appreciate the need and the value for a security program. And then, soon we're going to flip and talk about the privacy side, the use and collection side, not only the security piece. Can you share maybe just some of the kind of the themes, maybe when you went through the SOC 2, or now that you're evaluating maybe what is next? What are some areas that maybe an agency who hasn't done all of these things today, but could take away and say, gosh, I really should focus on, pick your number, 2, 3 of what they should start in on?
Yeah. And this is probably going to sound terribly basic, but I think at the core, what our clients want to know from us is that the right people have access to the right things, and only the right people to the right things. So what I would tell any agency is, at basic, you need to have a very good provisioning program, including your third-party tools. You need to be able to say to yourself and to your clients that these people have access to these things, these people do not have access to these things, and that you're managing that, and that you're enforcing that through a quarterly password reset program, multi-factor authentication, to your comment earlier, VPN, and all the other things that ensure that Jody, Mike, and Justin are the right people and that others are not the right people. Of course, all the other things, good firewall, good incident response plan, all those other things. But if I was going to tell an agency, if there's only one thing you do, have Active Directory, a really disciplined provisioning plan, and a secure way to know that only the right people have access to the right things.
So Mike, I want to ask you one other question, because this really relates to a lot of the value proposition of Red Clover, and it's this. Talk to us a little bit about how all of this work that you've done in security comes up in the sales process for your company, because you're doing this so that your customers have trust to all the things that you said, but too many times maybe customers aren't asking the question. So talk a little bit about how this may come up in the sales cycle for your company services.
Yeah. Great question. I in the last 2 years, I can't think of a new business pitch where at some point privacy and security came up. And certainly once we get down to the MSA and the scope of work, there hasn't been a new client that didn't ask us to agree to a framework. A large delivery client we onboarded last year expressly said, you will adhere to ISO 27002. And, for me, I want to be in front of that.
So in essence, without all the hard work that you've done, you could get pretty far down the sales path with a customer. And then you get to the MSA, which, you're on the 20-yard line in the red zone, and you see that. And if you don't have that or something pretty close to it in place, that deal goes sideways for probably minimum 90 to 120 days, or you may even lose the deal.
Exactly right. And then you're playing catch up and spending more money than you would have if you would have just played good offense. So I absolutely view this world as a strategic business objective.
So to that comment, and to kind of connect these, I'm seeing a lot of companies in all different industries promote what their privacy and security practices are at the very early beginning of a sales cycle. Can you share, how does that play out in the type of work that you all do?
Certainly, we have a large healthcare client in Florida. We have a couple banking clients. And certainly to even get into those pitches, you have to talk about your privacy and security credentials right up front. It doesn't come up front in all of them, but certainly in those more regulated industries. So, we proudly talk about being SOC 2 Type 2, compliant. And I hope in a year to be able to say that we're ISO 27002. I never know the right word, compliant. We adhere to it. We align to it. And those things are good markers showing that we're maturing as a company. And that's really how I talk about it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, I think I see a lot of companies say we adopt or adhere to XYZ standard is what I see a lot of companies say.
Yeah.
Kind of confusing. Adopt, line, pick your flavor.
Say we're ISO or NIST compliant.
Yeah.
There's
Indeed.
With all of that being said, what do you think is the biggest challenge you're facing today to help manage these privacy and security obligations?
We're a 450 person organization with a 6-person IT team. For me, it is bandwidth, resources, and sequencing. So I would love to tackle ISO 27002, putting in a SIM platform and pen testing this year. But in what order do I do those? And what new roles do I need to add? And what obligations will that commit me to? I mean, it's one thing to put in a SIM and in pen testing, but what will those programs reveal? And then, the classic, now you know what you didn't know. And what will it take for us to solve those things that we will now find out? So for me, it's resources, new roles, and sequencing.
So, Michael, another thing related to your comment about bandwidth, sequencing, and resources is, just listening to you talk, obviously you have to consider CCPA. Virginia just passed a privacy law. You could be implicated under New York Shield, or for some of your clients, you're a vendor under the Department of Financial Services under a separate New York cybersecurity law.
Florida's got a law that they're looking at.
Yep. So my question is, in this ever-changing cybersecurity and privacy landscape, how do you stay current on these laws and their implications for your company?
Great question. We're very fortunate. We have a chief legal officer that works for us here at Guided by Good, and she actually just hired a privacy specialist. So Deborah just joined us, and she just did a deck for us last week on the new proposed privacy law from Florida, which I was not all that close to. So again, this is a resources issue to your question. If you want to stay current and maintain eyes on it, you've got to have somebody doing that. I mean, I could spend all my time keeping up with all that, and candidly, I don't want to. I'd like to have somebody who's telling us, here's a new coming legislation, and here's what you need to be prepared for. Now, using CCPA as an example, that is one place where we're not as far along as we want to be. We're completing data mapping now to determine, what data we're collecting, what we do with it once we collect it, what our disposal cycle is, so that we can make sure that we're compliant with CCPA, and then the right language with our clients. Fortunately for us, we only collect information as a requirement for our clients. We're not just out collecting information. We're only collecting information for their media campaigns. So, ideally, we'll be able to craft the right language with them that they're responsible for CCPA compliance. We'll do our part, but they're responsible.
Absolutely. I mean, in that scenario, you're a service provider, presuming you only use the information on their behalf. And you also need to be able to, so for any agency listening who might not be as familiar with those obligations, I'm just sharing that part of the other responsibility is if Jody's a client of Truist and makes XYZ request, there's a potential relationship that you might have with Truist, depending on what type of activity you did, you might need to be able to support them. So knowing where all that data is going to help you be able to manage your obligations in that scenario.
Yes.
I wanted to switch gears for a moment. So we were talking about security and those standards and the privacy laws and how we're keeping up with them. Actually, the day of our recording is a big switch in the advertising industry with Apple releasing iOS 14.5. And that, now you have not only laws, but you have technology coming into play, trying to decide how everyone should be playing together or not playing together in the sandbox. Yes. I was hoping that you can talk, what does that mean to your clients? How do you educate clients? And kind of just your view. I'd love to hear, what is Mike's view on this new phase that we're entering?
Yes. Oh, the cookieless world.
Cookieless world. I mean, now personally, as you know, I like cookies. Now they're gluten-free chocolate chip. for when we get to meet again. But right now, we can just talk about cookie-less marketing.
So we have two groups that focus on media. We have our media team that's, it's media planning, media buying. And then we have a large group called digital investment, which is the whole MarTech stack, AdTech stack, where we're collecting anonymized data and all that world and all the technology and privacy that goes with that. So that team has been working on this change for months, many, many months. They're closer to it than I am, but it is clearly a big shift in the advertising space. I don't think anyone's fearful of it. I think there's other ways that technology enables advertisers to present relevant information to consumers when they want it. And we'll figure out how that works outside of the cookie world. But I don't think we're going to find ourselves in a place where Jody isn't able to find the things she wants on the web and get served the information that is helpful to you. But the technology mafia is going to do whatever they want to do, and that's how I refer to them. That is quite a crew.
you have some thought. No, I don't think he's going to name names.
I want to know who the members of the mafia crew are.
To me, it's the biggest players. It's Apple, Google, Slack, Microsoft. They're making the rules, and we're all just trying to keep up with it.
What about global privacy control? Has that been kind of we're talking about individual rights. Each company needs to be able to honor them. Now you have this concept of the technology maybe being able to do that, which again would change the business process, the internal process, everything about it. Is that been something that's been discussed, or it's a little bit too early on to really decide what's happening?
One, I think a little bit too early, and two, our scope. While we're proud to be a mid-sized private advertising agency, we currently do not have any global business. So we were largely able to dodge GDPR, though we did have to sign Google's addendum and Pinterest, please sign this or we'll cut off services. Again, very mafia type tactics. But we would like to have a global client. We would relish the opportunity to do that. So I think for us, Jody, it's still a little bit of wait and see.
Okay, fair point.
All right. Well, I guess one other thought I had was, how do you approach managing privacy compliance? It sounds like it might be a collaborative effort between you, the chief legal officer, because not only do you have the legal part, but now you have to operationalize the compliance. So how does that work from your perspective?
So we created a compliance team, I want to say 2.5, 3 years ago. Members of the compliance team were myself, the CFO, chief legal officer, and now this privacy specialist, and a contract manager. And so we have a cadence with that team, and we bring forward anything that comes up in privacy, anything that comes up in security. We agree to priorities, we agree to programs. This effort that we're engaged in with for CCPA and data mapping, that's a lot of work. And we're working with a third party to help us through that. And, that compliance team and that compliance cadence has been very, very helpful to us.
That's interesting. You note that the CFO is part of the team. What was the reason for selecting that particular individual, the C-suite?
It's interesting. Guided by Good is a creative agency and family of agencies, but it's also a very operationally disciplined company. So the CFO is a direct report to the CEO. So she actually chairs the compliance team.
Got it.
Excellent.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Well, we have Coffeeholic over here.
I know. I don't know what happened.
He's just so choked up about all of this compliance and all of these discussion points. I'm curious if one of the other areas that I talk about a lot is using language to be able to connect. You had mentioned, right, really using it as a strategic business advantage. And that plays in two different places. That plays in you and your customers, so your sales cycle, but then also on behalf of your customers. Are you seeing kind of an uptick from the connection in your sales cycle, or also, on behalf of how your customers are handling it? Because obviously they're coming to you saying, I need you to answer these 20-page DPAs or addendums. And in the process, they might be really incorporating privacy into their business as well.
It's interesting. Our clients want us to be serving the most relevant information to consumers based on who they are. So in some respect, they want us to get closer and closer to data. And the same hand is very important to our clients, and it's very important to us that we're handling data very appropriately, that we are very cognizant of privacy laws, that we are very respectful of privacy, and we have the right security infrastructure around that. So it's not a tension, it's an and. How do we deliver relevant, exciting, impactful advertising information to consumers that's relevant to who they are, and in a way that is respectful, respects their privacy, respects our clients' privacy requirements? So it's an and. How do we do both?
I really love how you mentioned that, because I actually think that, and how you recognize your clients want to get closer, which gets you closer to more data. And I think that will prove even more so in a cookieless world, because there's going to be such an increased reliance on first-party data, which means now you actually have, before we might have had cookies, and while that's considered digital data, it was different than my name and my email. And there's going to be such a push for having more first-party data that I think all the efforts that you've been doing on privacy and security and really having a strong program to protect that will really prove beneficial for you, and is something that all organizations really need to be mindful of.
Yeah, listen, it's been a crazy 18 months in any category you want to call it: pandemic, politics, just the globe, however you want to put it. I still think, we still think, our clients still think, and I think most people think, if you show basic respect to people, and privacy is a basic respect. I mean, I love it how the European Union considers privacy a basic human right. Mm-hmm. That people want to be doing business with companies that have a good moral compass, that have a good purpose, and respect them. And one way you can show respect is to handle privacy correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing.
See, I just struggle to see how we get there without some laws and regulations that have teeth, because as you pointed out, with the social or the technology mafia, their business is predicated on all of this data, because as we now live in the 21st century, that data is the number one asset that a company has. And so I agree with your comments wholeheartedly. It's just, again, I want to give accolades to your organization, because when I get involved, their incident response policy was call Justin because we saw him on a webinar, and it's a real mess. And I just don't know how we get companies to appreciate that privacy is a competitive advantage with their customers when there's so many incentives aligned to gobble up and vacuum up as much data as we can to market with people. And
yep,
I'm just interested.
I agree completely. I mean, we took creating our incident response plan very, very seriously. I mean, there's a section there for, who do you call? What authorities? Mm-hmm. And we took the time to make an appointment with the regional FBI gentleman that's responsible for cybersecurity. We went out there by Mercer University, went through the 18 checkpoint security check, and we met with him. And we have his cell phone number and how to reach him. I don't want to try to figure that out when I'm in the middle of a crisis. And so I agree with you. It takes work, but it gives me comfort that we have that plan in place.
As well it should. So with all of this knowledge that you've learned in the business world, what is the best personal privacy tip? And then I'm also going to ask, and you shared a little bit about some of the basics that a company could do. I'd love if you could share another one. So kind of what is a best personal privacy tip? And then maybe one more to do for someone who's not as far along as you are.
So my best privacy tip, and again, it may sound basic, is I tell people when your company sends you that forced password reset, whether it's quarterly or semi-annually, that's the same time you should update your passwords on your credit cards and your bank. And I tell people, if it's important to your company to maintain good provisioning and who has access, why wouldn't you be doing that on the things that are most important to you? Your banking, your credit cards, and your retirement account. And the other thing I tell people is, if you're not rebooting your laptop and your device, people often forget their iPhone or their iPad at least once per week, you're missing all the patches and the updates. So my advice is pretty basic, because I think those patching cadences and those rebooting and those password updates are very, very important. So to your second question, Jody, I would say probably the second thing from a security posture is, what is your patch cadence? I follow Krebs on security, his site online. And every time he communicates the Microsoft Patch Tuesday information, I'm copying that over to the IT team and saying, when are we patching? We use Sophos and other tools to ensure that we're pushing out updates. But, here's a good place where the technology mafia gets you tangled up. The new Apple operating system made one of our security applications out of date. In other words, that application wasn't up to date with the Apple operating system. So older laptops running on the older version forced us to refresh laptops faster than we wanted to. But I had to. Otherwise, I was going to have machines that weren't appropriately getting patched and updated. So I would say the second thing for any basic security program is a good patching cadence.
Excellent tips. And thank you for sharing.
Because what impedes good password hygiene? Because privacy and having to redo your password is what? It's inconvenient.
It is. But I say to people, you wouldn't put a big yellow sticky on your front door with your alarm code. So, if your bank account and your retirement account are important to you and you're counting on that for your quality of life, why wouldn't you just do a basic password reset at least a couple times a year?
And I've thought about that. And it's the same conversation when you say to a friend who you care about, you should think about exercising more and eating better. And they don't do it. And then they have to suffer some terrible health, which in the cybersecurity industry is, of course, double extortion ransomware. And then they are reborn into thinking about these things differently, which we can have a whole different discussion about how to incentivize employees and people to do the right thing. But I agree with you. It's just asking people to be proactive. It's just a tough thing. People don't like to change.
It is time consuming, but I say, really? Like, how many bank accounts and credit cards do you have? I have 4 or 5. So it's going to be 20 minutes of password changes.
Right. No, excellent tips. So when you're not telling employees to change their passwords or patching or figuring out if you should be doing ISO 27002 or NIST, what do you like to do for fun? So long bike rides on the weekend. I've become a road cyclist over the last couple of years. Morning walks and workouts with Debbie, single malt scotch, and my beloved Kansas Jayhawks basketball team.
Well said.
Yeah.
You got him at the bike and the outside.
Yes, you had me at bike.
Yeah.
Very happy. Well, listen, Mike, how can people find you if they'd like to learn more about you, 22 Squared? Where should they go?
LinkedIn is a great place to find me. All I ask is that people actually put something in why they want to connect with me and not just the standard LinkedIn. My Twitter handle is at @mgrindell. And I'm on the employee directory at 22 Squared.
Well, wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. You shared and hopefully inspired a lot of organizations who might have had privacy and security on the back burner and realize actually they can really impede the organization from a security standpoint and a sales perspective. So thank you so much for sharing all your great wisdom.
Yeah, it was great to connect with you too.
Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.